passage from the book of Genesis, chapter 29, verses 16 through 20, and then chapter 37, verses 3 through 4. I will read in German, and Abby will read in English. You can follow along on page 20 and 27 in the Pew Bibles in front of you, or on the screen above. Nun hatte Laban zwei Töchter. Die ältere heißt Lea, die jüngere Rachel. Lea hat glanzlose Augen, Rachel aber war ausnehmend schön. Jakob liebte Rachel, und so sagte er, gib mir Rachel, deine jüngere Tochter, zur Frau. Ich will dafür 7 Jahre bei dir arbeiten. Laban sagte, ich gebe sie lieber dir als einem Freundin. Bleib also die Zeit bei mir. Jakob arbeitete bei Laban 7 Jahre für Rachel, und weil er sie so sehr liebte, kamen ihm die Jahre wie Tage vor.
Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, I'll work for you for 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel. Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me. So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel.
Jakob hatte Josef von all seinen Söhnen am liebsten, weil ihm erst im Alter geboren worden war. Deshalb ließ ihm ein prächtiges Gewand machen. Als seine Brüder sahen, dass der Vater ihn mehr liebte als sie alle, begannen sie ihn zu hassen und konnten kein freundliches Wort mehr mit ihm reden.
Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age. And he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. This is the word of the Lord.
All right, good morning, everyone. If you were here last week, you know that we've started a short sermon series looking at the idea of family. And the reason we're doing that is coming out of the holidays. I think we probably need to talk a little bit about family and some of the experiences that we've had. And the way that we're doing that is we're looking at the story of Jacob and Joseph as a way to understand family more, but not just to understand dynamics of family, but to figure out how does faith and following after Jesus change our understanding of family? How does it change how we approach them and how we deal with family issues? And so we started last week, and we're going to continue through the month of January. And one thing that I said last week was that out of all the characters in the book of Genesis, I can't stand Jacob most of all. He's the one I dislike most of all because he's so shifty and he's so untrustworthy and he prefers people over the other. If you met someone like that in your workplace who totally played favorites, you could never trust a word that they said, you wouldn't actively want to be their friend unless you're just very compassionate. For most of us, we try to stay away from folks like Jacob throughout our lives. And so I don't naturally like Jacob as a character, but there are 2 things that I think help to round out our understanding of this guy and to soften our image of him a little bit. The first is to recognize that this is the way that he was raised. Right? If you know his story, you know that he had a mother and father named Rebekah and Isaac, and they played favorites with him. Rebekah's favorite son was Jacob, and so she was always manipulating circumstances to make sure he got favorable things, but that Isaac's favorite son was his brother Esau, and for a really strange reason, because Esau was a better hunter. So just imagine if you lived your entire childhood with both your parents openly saying, I like you, I don't like you as much, and I don't like you because you can't hunt, because I like meat and you can't hunt. And you realize then, his underhandedness and him playing favorites, that's kind of the way that he was raised his entire life. He doesn't know any different. And so what we said last week is sometimes the dysfunction that we see in our families and that we see in our own lives isn't just something that we are choosing to do, it is something that was chosen for us. It came out of our past, and sometimes we need to understand that and acknowledge that truth. But the other thing that helps me to have a warmer or more positive understanding of Jacob is that this guy really loves his family. He really does love his family. And we see that not just clearly described in Scripture, but poetically described in Scripture several times, where some of the most touching descriptions of family love apply to this guy, Jacob of all people. And we see that in the first verse that we read today in Genesis 29, where it says, Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. That's like something you read in a Hallmark card that you give to your spouse. It's been 20 years, but it's only felt like a few days or whatever. I mean, you don't see that in the Bible very often, but this is in the Bible. It's not my translation. This is literally what the biblical author wrote, that he worked 7 years, and it was just like that because he loved this woman so much. And if you know this story, it even goes further than this, because after those 7 years, he's tricked into marrying Rachel's older sister instead. And then Laban says, nope, sorry, you got to work another 7 years to marry Rachel. And most of us would be like, no, peace out. I'm going to find something else somewhere else. But no, he loves his wife enough where he says, fine, I will work another 7 years to earn the right to marry this woman. Can you imagine working 14 years, a decade and a half nearly, in order to be able to marry somebody? That's real love. That's real love. He's not a perfect guy, but clearly he loves his wife. He also clearly loves his son as well. It says, now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age. He made an ornate robe for him. And the Hebrew is a little more descriptive about ornate. It's not just one word, but it's a complex robe that he has made for it. And I think Technicolor Dreamcoat is actually better description than ornate is in the Hebrew. It's a beautiful coat. He loves this boy. He's that older father who loves this little child, because as you get older as a dad, you get less strict with your kids, and you're just like, oh yeah, do whatever you want, you're good. And I've seen that with my own kids. And so that's what's going on with him. He loves this young boy, and he's trying to give him the best presents, these wonderful gifts. He loves his son. He also loves his son Benjamin. When Benjamin might have to take a dangerous journey, this is what he says. If harm comes to Benjamin on the journey you are taking, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in sorrow. Just listen to the way that's phrased. He doesn't say, oh, I'll be sad. He says, if something happens to this son, my gray head will go into the grave in sorrow. He would die in sorrow if he had anything happen to this boy. He loves this child. And I think this helps to kind of give me a warmer understanding of this character, Jacob. He really loves people. He really loves Rachel. He would work a decade and a half for Rachel. He loves Joseph and is trying to give him the best things for his son. What parent doesn't do that? He loves Benjamin and wants to make sure nothing bad happens to him. This is love. So this is true about Jacob. I don't think we should misunderstand this. He truly loves his family. But equally true about Jacob is that he is also a man who is harming his family. And in fact, strangely enough, as hard as it is to believe, it's actually his love which is harming his family. It's that love that is so beautifully described in Scripture, which is harming other people. For example, he loves Rachel. We know that clearly. But in the act of loving Rachel so passionately and so faithfully, he is pushing someone else down and aside over and over again. And that's his first wife, Leah. By loving Rachel, Leah is being forgotten and dismissed and ignored during that entire time. And we see the effect on her when we read in Genesis 29 about her pregnancy and the birth of her sons. It says, Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben. For many of us, Reuben is a perfectly fine name, but this is what Reuben meant for her. It is because the Lord has seen my misery, and surely my husband will love me now. How miserable would you have to be to name your firstborn son after your pain, after the emptiness that you feel? That's what was happening to Leah. And it was happening because of love. Because Jacob loved Rachel so passionately and so single-mindedly, that love also pushed her down and away to the point where she was desperate for love, and she would even name her own children after that lack of love. We find the same thing with Joseph's brothers. It's clear to us that Jacob loves Joseph. He dotes on him, wants to give him the best things, which is so familiar to many of us in terms of what we see parents doing for children. But that love does something, even as it elevates Joseph and makes Joseph feel special. What we read in Genesis 37, it says, when his brothers saw this, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. And it won't end there. They won't just be mad at their brother, because eventually they'll want to kill him. They'll want to kill their own flesh and blood because of love. It's the love that Jacob has for Joseph that causes them to resent their brother to the point where they are willing to kill him in cold blood. That's what love did. Or you think about Benjamin. The fuller story about Benjamin's dangerous trip is that his brother is being held hostage in Egypt. He's been bound and manacled and is in Egypt. And in order to be set free, Benjamin needs to go to prove that everything is okay, that they're of good faith. So it's pretty easy. He goes to Egypt, and then Simeon gets set free. But Jacob's response is this: no, my son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead, and he is the only one left. He says, no, I'm not going to send my son, even if it means redeeming a different son. I would rather let that other son die than have this son, this precious son, be endangered. He loves Benjamin, but he loves Benjamin at the expense of other people, that someone might die because of his love for Benjamin. This is the difficult contrast, the contradiction that sits at the heart of Jacob's story, is that this man genuinely, like we said, he loves his family. He loves his wife. He loves his sons. But a consequence of that love is that he is hurting people. He is harming them through that love. And it illustrates a very difficult but often overlooked idea about love, a fact about love, and that is this: love is a wonderful thing that can also lead to very harmful things at the same time. Love is beautiful. It's a wonderful thing. But sometimes we don't acknowledge that through love, we can actually harm others, harm ourselves, and harm the people that we are trying to love. We struggle with that. Even with that phrase, when you see it up there, that love can be a harmful thing, there's something deep within us that just says, no, that can't be, because love is good. Love is the perfect thing. When you love someone, you always will do the right thing for them. You'll never hurt them if you love them. And I think we get that understanding largely from our culture and our society. We hold what I would call an overly romanticized and uncritical perception of love, where every movie that we see, every Disney film, every song that we hear, it basically says that if you love someone, don't worry. All you need to do is love them. There is literally a song that says all you need is love, and that's the end of it, right? And that's the entire song, is all you need is love, over and over and over again. And how many different movies have we seen that when people love each other? There's movies where like love transcends, I know I'm blanking out on the movie, but it like transcends eras where you love people over the course of centuries. They were like reincarnated as different people. It's crazy what we say about love. The love is perfect, and it will last, and it always finds a way, and true love always lasts, and all these different things. And even though it may sound silly when I say it, it slowly begins to sink in. You hear it enough, and we slowly begin to absorb this idea where we say, love? Oh, perfect. That's all I need to think about. I love this person. That's it. That's all I need is love. All I need to do is love my spouse. I don't need to think about how I love them or what my love is doing. I just love them. That's good. I love my kids. I don't know what my love is doing to them, but I love them. I love my brother and sister. We have this very uncritical and very short mentality towards love, where we think love is all that we need to think about. As long as I love someone, then everything is going to turn out right. Jacob's story forces us to be more critical-minded about it. That you can genuinely love someone with all your heart, with poetry sitting at the nature of how you love, and you could be hurting them. And you could be hurting many other people at the exact same time. That sometimes love can drive us to do harmful or destructive things. But I would venture a guess that this is not just Jacob's story, but this is a story that we're more familiar with when we're really honest about ourselves and our own stories. Then when it comes to our families, which is kind of our focus for this season, I think many of us would say that our families, there is a lot of love there. For most of us, hopefully, we could say, yes, I was loved and I love people in my family. And we would say, yes, that's one of the places where I've experienced the most love. And I would venture a guess that many of us would agree with that. But I would also say that many of us would agree at the same exact time that we would say those families are the place we were hurt the most, where there's the most bitterness, where there are the hardest memories, and maybe even trauma at the same time. And so this idea about love being hurtful at the same time is not as foreign and not as distant as we might think. Jacob's story, honestly, is probably closer to our own than we might believe. Now, I think this again kind of butts up against the modern understanding of love just being everything's good, you love someone, don't think about anything else. And so it's hard for us to visualize what does this mean to love someone and yet be harming them. And so I wanted to point out maybe some more concrete manifestations of harmful love, loving someone in a way that actually can harm them at the same time. And maybe this will help it kind of be a little more practical, a little more relatable. One of the ways that we can actually legitimately be loving someone yet harming people at the same time is unfair love. When we love someone in a way that unconsciously harms other people. That you love someone, it's true, but in the act of loving someone, other people are feeling less and less loved as a result of it. Probably unconsciously, but that's what's happening. That's what we find with Jacob and so many people in his life. He loves Rachel. He does love Rachel, but the act of loving Rachel is causing him to forget, ignore, and diminish someone else in that story who he also has a commitment to, which is his wife Leah. His love is causing someone else to be unloved and forgotten at the same time. Same with the brothers of Joseph. He loves Joseph. That's clear. But as he loves Joseph, other people, through that love, are being pushed down as if that love is kind of a zero sum. Joseph gets more love, that means other people get less. Rachel gets the most love, Leah gets none. It's this kind of idea of pie, right? If she gets 9/10 of the pie, there's only 1/10 of it to go around afterwards. And this is what we find in Jacob's story. But I think this is also something that maybe relates to you. Maybe in your family story, you've seen this or you've experienced this yourself, where someone was loving someone, yes, but you could not help but notice that that love also hurt others at the exact same time. That we love unfairly. We love as a zero-sum proposition. That if this person is being loved, other people are necessarily less loved, or they felt that way at the same time. That's one of the manifestations that we often see in our families. The other is needy love. When we love others so that they will love us because we feel unloved. We love others ultimately because we feel unloved. A perfect example of this is Leah. Leah really loves her husband. She really and truly does. She is willing to lay down her life to have sons in a dangerous time period over and over on behalf of this man. She desperately loves this man and will name her children after that desperation as well. But what motivates that love? Why does she love in this manner? She loves the way that she does because she's not loved. Because there's a vacuum, there's a hole. And it's that's driving this desperation that she would die for this man because she is so unloved. And it's that huge vacuum which is propelling her to love this man. Joseph, I love you. Will you love me? That's what her motivation is. And again, maybe some of us have seen this in our lives instead, where you've seen someone love, or maybe you felt this in your own life, but part of the motivation, part of the source of that love was emptiness. That you didn't feel loved. And so part of your love for that person was desperation, a vacuum, a deficit that you so desperately want to fill. And it causes you to do desperate and dangerous things in order to try to get that love. There's another form of love that is so destructive that we often get trapped into. Another is fearful love, when our love for someone causes us deep anxiety or fear. And we see this with Jacob and Benjamin. Jacob loves Benjamin. That's also clear from Genesis book 37 and onward. But with that love comes another emotion woven into it, and that is fear. He loves his son in a fearful way. He loves in a way where he thinks, I can't let anything bad happen to this child. I can't let anything happen, even if it means other people have to suffer. No, I'm so afraid of losing another son. I cannot let this happen. And so this love is bound together with fear. It's become woven into this love for his son, that he is so afraid of losing this son as he has lost his other beloved son, Joseph, as well. And I would say maybe this is one of the most common things that we have seen, especially in parents' relationships with children. Whether you are a parent or you've seen this in your parents' kind of actions towards you, where they love you or you love your kids, but somewhere in that love is fear. Where you love them in a way where you say, I can't let anything happen to them. And it's not just parents' relationships. Sometimes I do that with girlfriends or boyfriends or spouses. I don't want to lose this relationship. And so when that person gets sick, my gosh, it hits you hard. I remember when my wife got sick, the fear I felt was, I've never felt fear like that in my entire life, of losing someone that I love. And sometimes we love someone, and the other emotion that's just right there in the middle of it is fear. Will I lose this person? Will I lose this love? Will I do something wrong? Will they'll stop loving me? Where love and fear go hand in hand. Maybe some of us have seen that. And then all of us have seen what I think is the root, harmful manifestation of love, which is conditional love, where we love others or we are loved only when we do something for other people or we perform to our expectations. And that's what we see in Jacob. Jacob's love is conditional. If you're cute and you're young, you were born in old age, I love you. That's conditional love, right? If you're the son of Rachel, I love you. That's conditional love. And that then, if you think about it, that conditional love is the root of all the other loves, right? Because he loves conditionally, he loves cuter, more attractive people, he loves unfairly, right? So he loves unfairly because he loves conditionally. Because he loves unfairly, there are people who are needy for love. There's Leah, there's Joseph's brothers. He creates that neediness because of this conditional love. Because there's this neediness, there's fear. And the brothers ask, well, how can I get this love? How can I do this? And then Jacob fears losing this love as well. It all comes from conditional love. And we've all experienced that. We've experienced that from parents. We've experienced that from schools. We've experienced that across the board, where so many of our perceptions and our experiences of love truly are conditional experiences of love. Where if you're cute, you do the right thing, if you're attractive, you're lovable, then you're loved. And out of that understanding of love, whether we're receiving it or giving it to someone else, we sense unfairness in love. And we begin to fear, what if I do something wrong? Will this person stop loving me? And we become desperate for love, and fear begins to set in. When we think about this, when we think about these understandings of love, I think it hits much more at home. We begin to realize that love is a wonderful thing, but it can cause harm and destruction and devastation in our lives. And we begin to see and even connect the dots to things that have happened in our lives. I think it's good as we talk about this to take a moment to reflect on our lives, and especially in our families. All this applies to any of our relationships, but for the sake of what we're talking about, we're thinking about families. So just for a moment, take a moment to visualize and to think about the family members you love and who love you. Just take a moment to think about that. Think about their faces. Think about their names, the people that you love and also who love you as well. And I think for most of us, in our kind of shallow and superficial understanding of love, that's all you need. All you need to do is say, oh, I love my wife. I love my dad. I love my kids. I love my brother. And that's all we do, because that's all you need. But the story of Jacob and the story of our lives says, no, you need to ask another set of questions, and those questions are this. Are you loving those people in a way that actually might be harmful to them, to yourself, and to others? It's not enough to say, oh, I love my dad, because believe it or not, you might be loving your dad in a way that hurts your mom. You might be loving your dad in a way that's hurting you. And you might be loving your dad in a way that's hurting other people as well. And so we have to ask those questions because love can do that. And so all those faces that we thought about, we need to think, wait, I do love my kids, but how am I loving them? What's the consequence of this love? Is my love doing what Jacob's love did? Am I unwittingly putting my kids at odds with each other because I'm not being fair enough in how I give this love out? It's also a good moment for us to understand how we have been treated as well, because this is not something simply that we do to others. It might be something that has been done to us. And so I think it's a good moment for us to ask the other question, which is this: have you been loved in a way that harmed you? That when you think about someone who loved you, their love was love, and they genuinely loved you. Maybe they wrote poetry to you or whatever it might be. But be that as it may, they did hurt you. And they did in that love. Maybe it was so needy and desperate, or there was so much fear, and they prevented you from doing good things because they loved you so much, or whatever it might be. And maybe that sheds light into what you've received in your life as well. But asking this second set of questions about what our love is doing to people and what love has done to us opens insight. It's like putting on a new set of glasses where you're like, oh my gosh, yes, I love these people, but I haven't been loving them in a great way. Yes, I have been loved by these people, but I have not been loved in a great way. It gives us tremendous insight into the nature of our families, into the nature of how we are loving people and how we are loved by others. But it doesn't give us a whole lot of hope. Because you might sit there and say, now I get it. Now I get it that I am a problem in my own family. Now I get it that this love that was poured out so abundantly to me in some ways has given me some of the issues that I am working through right now. Insight is great, but what do we do beyond insight? Because we can all sit here and say, I get it, the ways that I've hurt other people and the ways that I am hurting as well. How do we move beyond that? How do we then go and live out different understandings, different models? And the answer is in the power of Jesus. Because what Jesus does is he takes every single destructive form of love that we have ever experienced and he redeems them and he restores them one by one. And I love this. I love how he's going to take everything that I just talked about and look what he's going to do. We think about unfair love, right? Unfair love where we're loving someone, but as we love someone, other people have to go down. This zero-sum pie kind of thing. Right? That's the love that we have seen. It's the love that we often give. But that's not what Jesus demonstrates. It's not the model that Jesus shows, because in John 3:16, this is what he says. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but inherit eternal life. And we often don't think about this verse critically because we know it, and we're just like, for God so loved the world and all this different stuff. Think about what he's saying here. John's saying God's love is for everybody. No one loses with God's love. There's not, for God so loved these people that they get everything and inherit eternal life, but no one else gets it. There's going to be losers in this. It's whoever. There is this inclusiveness to it that's really mirrored by this word world in here. For God so loved the world, in the Greek that word is cosmos. It's universe. It's this love that is like the universe. It's not pie. It's never-ending pie. It's pie you can give out, and there's still the same amount of pie afterwards. Jesus gives us a different paradigm of love. It's not zero-sum love. It's love that self-multiplies and continues to fill itself like jars of wine or loaves of bread. This is the love of God. We don't play this game. We don't play the game where if you love one person, someone's got to lose out. Through Jesus, when we love someone, all ships rise with it. What do we see in Acts chapter 10? But Peter, who has this dislike for Gentiles as unclean people, as people who are outside the will and the family of God, and then he says this: I now realize how true it is that God does not show favoritism, but accepts from every nation the one who fears him and does what is right. God's love is for everybody. No one loses out. He can love the people of God, the Jews, but it will flow beyond that. There's no boundary or no zero-sumness to the love of God where it's going to be exhausted with one person and then it'll just, no one else will get anything. That's not the game we play. That's not the model of love we've been shown. We don't believe in unfair love. We believe in abundant love. We believe in a love that never stops, that continues to be poured out. Jesus tears down unfair love and he gives us something different. You think about needy love. You think about this love that we give because we have none. Because we're so desperate and we're so unloved that's what propels us to love other people. This is what Jesus says. Again, let's think critically about these commandments. A new command I give you, love one another. That seems straightforward enough, but this is where the kicker is. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Sometimes we get stuck behind the commandment where we're hearing Jesus say, love one another, and we say, okay, I got to love one another. But he says how as well. He says, love one another as I have loved you, love one another. If I had to rephrase this just slightly, he's saying, I already love you, so love one another. As I have already loved you, as you already have my love, go ahead and love one another. None of us have to love out of a sense of unlovedness because we are loved. We are beloved already. And that's where we love other people. Not out of the whole, but out of the abundance that we've been given. And he'll repeat this in John 15 where he says, my command is this, love each other as I have loved you. None of us need to love other people because we have a hole, because God is pouring into that hole. None of us have to play the game of loving people out of neediness because we are not needy beggars. We are beloved children of God. That's broken. And so for any of us who live out or have done this form of love, we don't need to do this anymore because we are not beggars for love any longer. We are beloved children of God instead. And so we upend this understanding of love. You think about fearful love. A love where you love somebody, but because you love them, you're afraid. You're afraid for their welfare. You're afraid that they'll be taken away from you. You're afraid that you'll mess up and that person won't love you any longer. But this is a love that we find in Jesus. 1 John 4:18, there's no fear in love. Perfect love drives out that fear. Perfect love drives out that fear because fear has to do with punishment. Or Romans 8, know in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. 2 Timothy 1, for the Spirit God gave us did not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. We don't need to let love create fear because the love that God gives is bigger than death itself. Nothing can separate us from this love. And so why should we be afraid of anything? If God's love can't be defeated, if God's love makes us more than conquerors, God's love does this. Human love makes us fear because it can be conquered. Death can conquer it. That's why we're afraid. God's love says, death is nothing on me. And so that's where we lose fear. And so that is also broken. We don't have to worry about our kids' welfare because God loves them more than we do. And even hard situations are not so dark that they will outshine God's brightness. What do we have to fear if God's perfect love is here? So again, we see him just one by one knocking them down. And finally, conditional love, that root love that we so often see that drives so many other destructive things. Instead of conditional love, we have the cross. Romans chapter 5. You see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died not for the good, but for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. We live according to a model where we receive and live out conditional love every single day. Every single day to the people around us, we live out this thing where someone does good, we love them. I do good, you love me. That's not our model. That's not our image. It's not the love that we see on the cross. The love on the cross is the opposite. It's that you are not good, but I would die for you. And this is what God shows us, an totally unconditional love. This is our love. Not a conditional love, but a completely grace-filled love instead. Every single form of love that has caused destruction and damage in our lives or we have given to others, we have a better way. We have a better way that Jesus has given us point to point to point. He's restored and redeemed and given us a better model of love. In Jesus, we experience a more perfect love, which we can then give to others. We can then give to others. I want to give us another moment to kind of continue that reflection that we did earlier. Before, we took a moment of self-reflection to ask, in our families, in our loving relationships with our families, in what ways have we harmed people? And in what ways have we actually harmed others as well? And then we need to be honest about this. We need to understand this as well. But at the same time, we also have to understand that this is not our model. That whatever ways in which you've seen unfair love or fearful love or needy love, realize that Christ shows you a different model. And so the other question I want to ask you today is, do you really know the love of Jesus in your life? How do you connect with that? What are the ways that you need to know this? Because it's this love that will break the power of all the other loves. If you want to live out and know a different love, then we need to know the love of Jesus. So I don't say this in a generic pastor way of, do you know the love of Jesus in your life? I'm genuinely asking all of us this question. Do you know this love that's overabundant? Do you know this love that's already beloved, where you're already beloved and you never have to do it out of a deficit? Do you know this love that can never be defeated, and so you have nothing to fear? Do you know this love that's there, whether you're good or bad, in your worst or best moments? Because we need to know this love in order to live out a better one. And the second question is this: what does it look like then to love your family in the way that Christ loves you? What does it look like to go to those same people that you love and to love them in the way that Christ loves you? What needs to start happening? What needs to stop happening? What needs to keep on happening as well? Why don't we just take a moment to just pray and reflect on that as the worship team comes out? Just to think about these people, to recognize that, yeah, there have been some destructive understandings of love that we have experienced, but to let Jesus come into the middle of it. So maybe for some of us, it's been unfair, either what we've done or to others. Realize that God's love is not that way. You don't need to do that. And you don't need to be loved that way either. God's love is like the ocean, and you're going to have a hard time emptying it. If you've experienced needy love, where you've seen or you've loved person out of the emptiness in your heart, realize you don't have to do that either. You're already beloved. As God has loved you, so you love others. If some of you have dealt with fearful love at the same time, where love has driven you to be afraid, you don't have to do that, and you don't have to receive it anymore. God's love cannot be broken. It cannot be defeated. Even the gates of hell will not prevail over it. Know this love. If you've known and experienced conditional love, look at the cross and realize that Jesus would die for you at your worst, at your very worst. Let the love of God redeem and restore your hearts and break the power and the experiences of the other kind of love that we've seen in our lives. Let's just let God's love do that for a moment together. Let's just bow our heads in prayer. God, that is really my prayer for every person here, for anyone who has been loved unfairly or who has loved unfairly. God, pour out right now and let them know that your love is endless, that all people benefit when we are loving like you, when we are loved by you. For those of us who have experienced or lived out needy love, help us to remember we're already beloved. It is out of that belovedness that we love others, that we do not have to love because we are empty, because we are full. For those of us who love in fear, Help us to know that your love, your perfect love, drives out fear. Nothing in all creation, angels or demons, life or death, height, nothing in all creation can separate us from your love. What do we have to be afraid of? For those of us who are stuck in conditional love, whether things that we give or things that we have received, help us to remember the cross. That's our love. It is a love that is poured out at our best and our worst. Pour out this love that we might experience a better way and also be able to live out a better way as well. We pray this in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen.